I think there's a lot of pressure for young people to be, to have it all figured out by 25, to have the degree, have the career, have the house, have the all life goals set for the next 20 years. And I think it's bullshit.
Rue, start the show! I'm Beatrice, your badass branding strategy girl, and welcome to the Art of Branding Badassery podcast. Rue expects your best branding game. You don't want to miss out on 95% of your audience, do you? Heck yeah, we're talking visual identity today, and brand guidelines is the game. And to dive into this, we've got on the creative badass behind epic content for exciting brands, a freelance graphic designer who wields her design tools like a superhero does a cape, conquering the freelance game in under 12 months. Please welcome fellow tattoo and gym addict. Thank you for joining us, Jane Kisnica.
Oh, that was really good. That was really good pronunciation. Well done.
Like, say it 10, 20, 30 times beforehand. It's same as mastering a skill. You just say a name that many times, 10,000 times, and then you got it. It's fine.
Yeah, no, true. It's also a sign of a good interviewer when you can actually learn how to pronounce like funky names and surnames. So,
Exactly. Well, speaking of interviewer, now you've told me behind the scenes that Harry Potter isn't your cup of butterbeer. Why aren't you a fan? And if you were to reimagine the Hogwarts houses with your unique design touch, how would they look?
Oh, I don't even know what they look like. That's how little I know about Harry. Like I know they have some, I just find the whole thing very boring, and the main characters, very annoying, especially the ginger one, Hermione, whatever her name is.
Yeah.
I don't know. I couldn't get into it. The first part of the last movie, I went to the cinema with my best friend years ago, and I stood up and walked out halfway through because I was so bored, and I was like, I'm wasting my evening. I can't deal with this. I'm gonna go. So I know they have some sort of animals and gargoyles or something like that in their monograms or whatever, but I wouldn't. I don't know.
Yeah. That's how I feel that. So you haven't read the books or anything, right? Okay.
No.
Okay. So we're not going to talk about Harry Potter today. Thank God. No annoying kids. It's fine.
Good. Now, good. I can't say much about it apart from that I don't like it.
Now, behind the scenes, for everyone who's listening, we've actually met before because we're both currently living in Thailand. But like me, you're both, you're working with people around the world. How have you found balancing time zones, work, etc.?
For me, because I do graphic design, it's all right. The only thing that's a bit annoying is that I need to take late evening calls. Mm-hmm. So I have a call after this. What is it? 6 p.m. now. I have a call at 7:30 p.m. after we do this recording. So that's probably the only thing that's a bit that's not great. But everything else, I don't have any problems with it. I'm kind of mostly ahead of everyone, and I like that. Because by the time, for example, UK and Europe, where most of my clients are located, once they start waking up and kind of checking their emails, I'm already halfway through the day.
Yeah.
And have done a lot of work, submitted a lot of work. So I always feel like I'm a step ahead of everyone. So I kind of like the time difference. So
girl, I'm always telling people, yeah, I'm ahead of time. I can tell the future. Do you need to know what happens, what goes down in the future?
The scary thing is that there are people out there who would believe that.
Oh no.
That's the scary part, that you can tell someone that you're 6 hours ahead, and you know that you're what's going on 6 hours ahead in life, and they will believe you.
Yeah. That is seriously scary. So brand guidelines from a visual perspective. Now, how would you describe them and why are they important?
Brand guidelines, they can be very short or very extensive. It really just depends on the project, on what the client needs, what the designer supplies, all that stuff. But brand guidelines is basically a document. Some call it brand book, brand guidelines, brand guide, whatever the name is used for it. But it's basically a document that has all your branding assets in it. So, where your colors, your color codes, how to use your colors, how not to use them, your fonts, how to use them, how not to use them, logos and their variations, and again, how you should be using them, how you shouldn't be using them. So it's basically a document that tells you how to apply the assets that your designer has created for you. And as I said, it can be literally a single page that just has your colors, your fonts, your logos, and maybe, I don't know, like a design or two on there to show you how to use the colors and fonts together. Or it might be a 20, 30, 40 page document that also has your brand voice in it. It has your how to use images, what kind of images to use, shapes, patterns, whatever it is. It really depends on the brands. Like for me, because I work with small businesses, they're usually smaller documents. Mine are usually about 10 pages and that have the basic information that someone would need to take that and do their thing with it. But yeah, it's an important document. Like everyone who has branding done should receive some form of brand guidelines at the end of it, so at least they have all their stuff combined into one place.
Exactly. And so when you have a client that comes to you with an existing guideline, what do you take from it and how do you use that in your design work?
So again, it depends on what the brand guidelines are like. Some brand guidelines that are more extensive, that come with design examples and tell you what type of shapes to use and how to put it all together. I'll literally just look at that document and just do what it tells me to do, right? I'll just like, okay, this font is used for headings, this font is used for copy, you need 50 points spacing between the letters or whatever it might be. I'm just going to look at that and then design based on the guidelines. And the more extensive ones are great because they already straight away give you a visual example of what the brand and design should look like.
Yeah.
When the guidelines are a bit more basic, and I only kind of get just the colors and the fonts and maybe the logos and things like that, it probably won't tell me much in a visual sense what the brand should look like. So that's kind of makes the job harder for me, because then I need to go out and their website and look at their social media, which I would do anyway. But when the brand guidelines are more extensive and have those examples, it just makes your job that much easier, because you have, okay, I actually have an example and I can see how all this can be laid out and how it works together. And I don't have to do that from scratch and try to figure out, how to lay it out and how it works and how it should look. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So for people who are receiving brand guidelines from, whoever they're working with, what would you say would be the bare minimum that should be included in there? Because I'm sure, there's a lot of designers that they're like, oh yeah, no, I'll give you a brand guideline. And then, it'll be that situation where you're like, I have nothing to work from here. Here's like a logo, it's a PNG and it's not even editable. Like, what would be the bare minimum?
For me, what I do for my clients, I have a template that I've created that I use for brand guidelines for each of my clients, unless they come to me and go, I want a more detailed, more custom brand guidelines, which obviously costs more because it's more custom work. But the standard that I do for my clients, all of them that come to me for branding, I think it's 9 or 10 pages. So yeah, it has a page for colors, and all the like hex codes, RGBs, CMYKs, just CMYKs for prints, RGB is digital, and hex code is the little numbers and letters that everyone is most familiar with. Then I have fonts, page for fonts. So I show people how to use the heading font, the subheading. It's linked to where they can be downloaded, because all the fonts I deliver come with commercially commercial free license so they can use it. They don't have to purchase it.
Yeah.
Then I have a page that is design examples. So I usually use like square Instagram post style where people can actually see how the branding could look when all the elements are put together with the logo, with the fonts, with images. I have a page for how to lay the logo on top of images, because some logos, for example, you can put on top of an image, and some that might have more detail and design elements might not look good on just directly going onto an image. So it might need like a transparent overlay. So I kind of give a little explanation on that. There's a page on how the actual logo would look on some, what's it called, merch. So like t-shirts and whatever it might be, depending on the brands. But yeah, those are kind of, I feel like and then there's like page for the available logos, and then what backgrounds the logos should be used on and what colors they can be used in. So like basic information, but it kind of gives you enough to start with something, because you have some design examples, you have information on how to use the logo, how not to use it, and how to use the fonts, and it gives a starting point to the person who receives it.
Exactly.
So I think those should definitely be, because I think if you provide just one pager where you have literally just, oh, these are your brand fonts and these are your colors and codes, that's not a brand guide. I don't think that's a brand guide. I think it's just a one page. Or brand guide is actually something tangible that someone can take and then use going forward, like a one pager with your colors and fonts. There's no design examples. There's nothing that you can actually use to get a feel for the brand, right? So
absolutely,
that's what I think about that.
And I love how you mentioned about the licensing as well, because I see that a lot where people just they use whatever font from Google, and it's in their business on their like advertising, marketing, and that's a whole lot of trouble.
Yeah, like it's like taking any font, like I always say, it's taking any font from just going into Google and typing fonts and then going on Font Squirrel or whatever and downloading whatever fonts that's on there and then using it for your business is like walking into a shop, picking up a pack of crisps and not paying for it and walking out, because it's theft if you don't check the license, because some will be free. Yes, a lot of fonts online, they do come with a free commercial license that you're allowed to use for your business, but I would say it's probably about 20% of all the available fonts that you can download, or typography, whatever you want to call it. The right word is typography.
Exactly,
yeah, I always make sure that the clients have the right licenses and the right fonts, because I often have clients who come to me and go, oh, this is my font. And I'm like, okay, do you have licenses for this so I can use it? And they're like, what? No, I just downloaded it online. And I'm like, well, I can't use this because I can find an alternative that I can have access to. Because sometimes I have loads of subscriptions and I might be able to find that font on one of the sites that I pay licensing to, so I can take their assets and use for my design work. But if I can't find it, I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't use it unless you buy me a license or pay for the font, which also has happened in the past where I have had to invoice the client for buying the license so I can actually use the font that they're using. So yeah, I think it's just a lack of education. I think designers, obviously not all of them, but there are a lot of them who don't educate people on this, and they just kind of I would be very worried if designers themselves didn't know about this. But I think that they just take the lazy route out, and it makes it easier to find pretty fonts and make it all look nice and cute and whatever, and just give it to the client, and it's not their problem because they won't have to deal with it if things don't, like if the client gets picked up for it, for using a font without a license. So yeah, it's a tricky one.
Well, if you need to borrow Rue with the baseball bat just to like sort things out, get people in order, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
I'll come and break some kneecaps as well.
Oh yeah. So speaking of mistakes, what common mistakes have you found where people have already been given these visual brand guidelines, and they're moving forward doing their own stuff with it. What are the mistakes that you've seen them doing on their own side, right? Like if they're not hiring you, like they're trying to do it themselves.
There's a lot.
Top three.
Some of the most common ones are using the colors, color contrast, because people don't really get color contrast. And I'm actually thinking about introducing another page into my brand guides that actually shows which colors can be used on top of each other. So people tend to use colors that don't have the right contrast, which makes the design not accessible for people with visual impairments, right? That's the contrast thing, and mixing the wrong colors together is a that I see very often. I even see it from designers. I even have it when I have branding come in, and the colors, okay, the palette might be pretty, but there's like the contrast is terrible. So I have to introduce another color just so people can actually read the text and see the elements, right? So that's one thing. Then it's mostly layouts when it comes to text. It's always too big, too small, or it has too much like space in between the lines, or not enough space in between the lines. Text formatting is definitely something that I see people get wrong 99% of the time, all the time. Like I would say 99% of the graphics that I see on LinkedIn, they probably have like bad text layout and no hierarchy and things like that. So, but it's something that is hard to, if you don't know the rules and if you don't understand how these things work and it's not something that you do, it's hard to know. Because if you don't have the design eye, you look at something, oh yeah, this looks fine, and I look at it and go, no, no, don't do that.
Baseball bats, hello.
So yeah, it's mostly formatting and the way people lay things out, and I think also people try to put too much in a single graphic and not think about white space, and they try to fill out the whole design. If it's a LinkedIn banner or a carousel, they try to squeeze in all this text, and it just looks cramped and it doesn't look good. And I often say this to my clients, like, not everything needs to be in your design or on your single page. Like, you need to pick out the main informations. If it's a banner, have your tagline, the shorter the better. Don't want 2 sentences that explain your business in detail with pretty words. It's not like, it's useless. No one's going to read that. It's not going to look good. And it's just not, you need to be able to deliver the information like that. And if you have 2 long sentences and then loads of other different small text everywhere trying to describe every service and everything that you do, no one's going to read it. It's too much. It's overwhelming. It doesn't look good. So yeah, just cut it back. Just cut it back. Less is more.
Oh my God. I once saw a banner, and I only saw it because I noticed, I went to check somebody's page that saw my page. This person copied or screenshot a part of my banner and copied it onto their banner, which is like a completely different color scheme. And I was like, oh okay. All right. Wow.
Yeah, I remember you telling me this. Yeah, that's another. That's also. I've seen like Frankenstein designs like that as well. That also happens, but yeah, it's
so okay.
Interesting.
If it's like a carousel, and people are thinking about the spacing and the things that you've mentioned regarding the layout, what 2 tips would you give to make sure that it looks clean, readable?
It's 2 tips. It's a hard one. Like, again, it's such a, it comes with experience, right? And kind of understanding how these things work. And one thing I would say, most people will obviously, listening to this, use Canva. So I'd make sure to turn on guides and rulers in Canva. You can do it, I think, under the file button and scroll down. People Google it. Just if you don't know how to turn it on, they're not turned on, just Google how to turn on rulers in Canva. It's very simple. It takes 2 seconds. But what that does, first of all, it gives you rulers so you can actually drag them onto the artboard from left and top. And then the artboard itself, it usually has like call it like almost safe zone.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the main artboard, and then there's like a little purple line. If you move assets around, once you hit that purple line, when the guides are turned on, it will come up as a little purplish square. I would not move any assets past that square because, first of all, that keeps it away from the sides. You don't want text too close to the sides at the bottom or on the edges. So you want to keep it within that purple square. And to make it easier, you can drag down the rulers to actually mark that middle space, and it will apply. Once you do it on one artboard, it will apply to every artboard that you create, so you won't have to do it over and over again. And then obviously depends on how big your text is and in like text size itself, not the actual words, but I wouldn't put more than 2-3 sentences on a carousel page, for example. And you always want to think about hierarchy, so you want your first, for example, paragraph or heading, whatever it might be, you might want to do it bold, mm-hmm. and then the text that comes under it, do it lighter text, so that will create nice text hierarchy. So you have like the main bit and then the bit under it. When it comes to the spacing between lines, mostly you need to bring it in a bit instead of making it more. I see that a lot of people tend to put these massive gaps between the lines. You do not want to be going over 1.4, which is the measurement. I don't know if it's pixels or points. I don't actually know what Canva uses to measure this thing. But the line spacing is set as a rule 1.4. You don't want to be going over 1.4 because it's going to be too wide. You most often will probably want to bring it in a bit to maybe 1.3 or even 1.2 if it's for headings, because headings can be closer.
Yeah.
If it's a heading text and you have 2 lines in the heading, you can bring it in, especially if it's caps, for example, all caps, bring it into 1.2 or even 1.1 might work really well. With the body copy, either 1.3, 1.4, but I wouldn't go over that because that's too much and it doesn't look good and kind of just distorts the whole design.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you for that. And so there's one question I ask everyone that comes on board here, and that is, what is the biggest societal norm that you want to push back on and teach others about in general?
Oh, which one do I pick? Which one do I pick? The fact that you need to have it all figured out in your 20s. I'll go with that one. Like, I think there's a lot of pressure for young people to be, to have it all figured out by 25, to have the degree, have the career, have the house, have the, all life goals set for the next 20 years and all. I think it's bullshit. Like, mm-hmm. It's stupid. How are you supposed to know? You barely lived. You've been, depending which part of the world you live in, you've been allowed to drink alcohol maybe for 5 to 7 years or less. Like, America's 21, isn't it? Yeah. So I think it's, so many young people. Like, I remember having friends when I was younger I was probably in my late 20s and they were like 22, 23 and literally pulling their hair out because they haven't had their life sorted out. And I'm like, you literally just moved out of your mother's house like a year ago. You barely worked. Like, you haven't lived a life. Like, what are you stressing about? Like, just do things, enjoy, change careers, try different things out. You don't have to have it all set and figured out. All I did was in my 20s just move around jobs. I probably had about 15, 20 different jobs in my 20s. And it helped me. First of all, I learned a lot because I did different things, different people, encountered different people from working in bars and dealing with scumbags to dealing with very posh bankers in Canary Wharf, when I worked in a pub there. So I had experience, and the older I got and the more things I did, the more I realized, okay, I like this, I don't like that. And it slowly took me to where I am now. Because in my early 20s, I wanted to own a pub and be like a pub person. I couldn't think of anything worse right now. Like,
Love
I want to
it.
be in bed by 10:30, 11 o'clock. I don't drink. I like, it would be horrific, but I was 21. It was my first real job after I moved away from home. And how am I supposed to have all this figured out? And especially when you haven't really lived. So I think young people just need to chill and
Mhm.
and go and travel and see the world and work in different jobs and do different things and experiment and try things out and not be scared of it, because you only figure yourself out and you figure out what you want to do by doing things and being exposed to different things and experiencing different stuff. So yeah, that's my
Yeah,
thing that I'm going to go with.
definitely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And it's really frustrating that schools push so much on, like, okay, you have to choose university, you have to choose a topic. What do you want to do for the rest of your life? And that's not something that
I'm
should be taught.
16. How am I supposed to know at 16 what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
it's insane. It's insane. I just think it's such a silly, obviously putting kids on some sort of path, that's good, but to kind of put that pressure on a young person to make them feel like they have to have it all figured out by like 25, or into their late 20s, when their brain has just stopped developing. They're only probably now are becoming a person they're going to be for the rest of your life, because your 20s, you change all the time. 30s is when you kind of go, okay, I'm kind of getting grips with this. I'm getting grips with what I like, what I don't like, who I am, who I'm not.
Mhm.
And yeah, having all that pressure to have it all figured out in your 20s is just insane.
Exactly. Well, thank you again for joining, Jane. And how can people reach you?
So LinkedIn is the best, probably, or through my website, which is linked through my LinkedIn, and you can find me like this. My name is on here, so you just type that into LinkedIn search. There's no one else under that name. Bright pink picture. That's where to find me.
Hell yeah, thank you. So those details will also be in the episode description. And drop any questions you'd like answered about the show in the comments. And of course,
Stay badass.